Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I am going to be doing part 2 of my favourite characters list. So in my first video I did from number 21 to number 11 I think it was. So today I will obviously be doing number 10 to number 1. Very excited about this. I do have quotes for every single person in this list. And without further ado, let's get started. So in 10th place we have... That was my really terrible attempt at doing a drum roll. Shivers from the First Law World by Joe Abercrombie. Now this is a new entry. He was in my list last year, but as an honourable mention. But as I've read more of the First Law World and as I've reflected on the First Law World, Shivers has to be in my list and he has to be in the top 10. So he's in the 10th place. The reason why I love Shivers is that he is an incredibly honourable individual. Don't get me wrong, he does some really messed up stuff, but to be honest with you, a lot of that stuff is out of his control. I just have a massive soft spot for him. I just think he's been dealt like a really bad hand and he kind of owns it in the later books. And I kind of respect that. I respect him for everything that he's gone through and how he handles it generally. There's certain things that he does that would negate that. But for the most part, I actually think Shivers is a good man and a lot of people love him. And that in itself is generally quite telling. The quote that I picked is as follows. Shivers heaved out a sigh. Just trying to make tomorrow that bit better than today is all. I'm one of those, you've got a word for it, don't you? Idiots? He looked sideways at her. It was a different one I had in mind. Optimists. That's the one. I'm an optimist. How's it working out for you? Not great, but I keep hoping. Oh, so good. All right, in 9th place, we have another character from the First Law World, and that is also Dan Luther from the Age of Madness trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. He's a new entry. He is just such a fantastic character, so layered. He kind of comes across as the typical pompous prince who's been pampered his whole life and doesn't really have much depth. But as we go further into the trilogy, we realize that that is not the case, and there's actually a lot of depth to this individual and there's a lot of complexity to this individual. And I just loved him. I loved the fact that he's so hard on himself and the fact that he's actually very self-aware. My favorite chapters were all the also chapters, and I wish we had a book just about him, but it is what it is. And for the quote that I picked, people expect a certain amount of indolence in a crown prince. It was quite winning when you were 17. At 22, it began to become tiresome. At 27, it looks positively desperate. Oh, so good. He's such a tragic character, but I feel like all Abercrombie characters are tragic in some way. All right, so in 8th place, we have a new entry, and that is Gabrielle de Leon from Empire of the Vampire by J. Crystal. Now, I cannot believe I have a J. Crystal character in my top 20 plus list. Like, that's insane to me. I can't even believe he's in my top 10 because I'm not the biggest fan of the author himself. And I've heard very bizarre, odd things about some of his books. But Empire of the Vampire was a fantastic start to this new trilogy, I believe it is, that he's writing. And one of the reasons why I loved it was because of Gabrielle de Leon. Now, Gabrielle, he kind of fits that typical archetype that I really enjoy. You know, he's kind of like the rough and tough warrior, but really he has a heart of gold. Very morally grey, lots of complexity, lots of layers. And as you peel back those layers, you really see a sensitive individual who has been through a lot of stuff. Gabrielle also has a great sense of humour. Like, I really like his dry, sarcastic humour. It's my humour. And that's why he's pretty high up this list. Now, this quote is one of my favourite quotes in a book that I've ever read. I love this quote so much. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and read it. It's in silence we know ourselves, vampire. It's in stillness we hear the questions that truly matter, scratching like baby birds on the eggshells of our eyes. Who am I? What do I want? What have I become? Truth is, the questions you hear in the quiet are always the most terrifying, because most people never take the time to listen to the answers. They dance and they sing and they fight and they fuck and they drown, filling their gullets with piss and their lungs with smoke and their heads with shit, so they never have to learn the truth of who the fuck they are. Put a man in a room for 100 years with 1,000 books and he'll know 1,000,000 truths. Put him in a room for a year with silence and he'll know himself. So good. Such a good quote. Like, it's just so good. All right. Next we have, and this was character blew my mind and is a character that I still think about to this day, is Tuish Knesson from The Company by KJ Parker. Toish Knesson is another really twisted individual. I mean, he's not really morally grey, like he's just a twisted guy. Like he's gone through a lot of stuff, and he's just a very complex individual. But then I think when you really reduce his motivations down, they're actually quite simple. And I think they lean towards our most kind of base instincts of being a human. And that's why I really like Knesson, because I think he's a really good example of just like pure human evil. And it might not seem like it at the start, but when you really start to unpack why he's doing what he's doing, it's pretty messed up stuff. So without further ado, here's my quote. When I was a kid, I really didn't want to be a farmer. What a total waste of a life, I thought. Everything you'll know you've learned by the time you're 15, and every year is the same as the year before and the year after. You know exactly what you'll be doing this day 12 months hence, because it's what you're doing today. I can't do that, I thought. I'll go mad. So I made them let me go to college and be a soldier. The reason why I picked that quote is because I believe you get that like in the middle towards the end of the book. And so at that point, you're already understanding who this person is and why he's doing what he's doing. So having that as almost like the trigger of kicking off all of these events that both happened prior to the events of the company and then in the company is just so good. So good. All right, in sixth place, so this one moved down quite a few places. I think 4 places he moved down. And that is Sandan Glockter from The First Law by Joe Abercrombie. Glockter will always have a special place in my heart. I think he'll have a special place in everybody's heart just because of the struggle and the fact that I think a lot of us can actually relate to him. If you've ever been ill, if you've ever been immobile, if you've ever, had to rely on other people, when you're sick, then I think Glockter is a character that you will definitely identify with. I most certainly do, especially when I was very, very ill. And honestly, having Glockter as a character that I could relate to helped me get through that time, or it helped me partly to get through that time because, the little monologues go off in your head. And I really like Glockter because I think he's one of the smartest characters I've ever read, if not the most smartest character. I don't want to go ahead and say that. I want to do an updated list of the smartest characters that I've read, but he's definitely up there. And as we all know, I love a good smart character who has, who's 10 steps above everybody else and is kind of doing what he needs to do to get what he wants. And I just love that about Glockter. So without further ado, here is my favourite quote. You are aware, I suppose, that I lived through 2 years of torture, 2 years in hell so I can stand before you now, or lean before you twisted as an old tree root, a crippled, shambling, wretched mockery of a man, eh, Lord Hoff? Let us be honest with one another. Sometimes I lose control of my own leg, my own eyes, my own face, he snorted, if you can call it a face. My bowels too are rebellious. I often wake up daubed in my own shit. I find myself in constant pain and the memories of everything that I have lost nag at me, endlessly. He felt his left eye twitching. Let it twitch. So you can see how, despite my constant efforts to be a man of sunny temper, I find that I despise the world and everything in it, and myself most of all. A regrettable state of affairs for which there is no remedy. Oh God, that just kills my heart. Honestly, Glockter's such a good character. Perfectly executed, and honestly, if it wasn't for some of these other characters, he'd be further up the list like he was last year, but needs must. All right, in 5th place, we have another new entry, and that is Kazaril from The Curse of CHALION by Lois McMaster Bujold. I love Kaz. He's just so good. Again, you'll see a very common theme with a lot of the types of characters that I like. I love the kind of rough and tough soldier, military leader, mercenary, whatever it may be. But then, they actually have a lot of depth and a lot of layer, a lot of vulnerability that we discover as the book or the books progress. Kaz is maybe a slightly softer version of some of those characters that I enjoy. I don't think he's as dark or as morally grey, but he definitely has some of those layers that make him really compelling as an individual. He is a veteran and he's, trying to figure out his place in life after his kind of whole world shattered. And so we have this kind of very pessimistic worldview that we get from him. But then as he meets different characters throughout the duration of the book, we see how he changes and adapts to those situations and to those characters that I just think is wonderful. And for that reason, he's up there as one of my favorite characters. So here is my favorite quote. Any man can be kind when he is comfortable. I'd always thought kindness a trivial virtue, therefore. But when we are hungry, thirsty, sick, frightened, with our death shouting at us in the heart of horror, you were still as unfailingly courteous as a gentleman at ease before his own hearth. He really values honour, and I love honourable characters, and that's why he's up there in my top 5. In 4th place, this is actually the only female character I have in my top 10, which is interesting because I had quite a lot in my part 1. There you go. And that is a character that was in my list last year, and she's just moved down 2 places, and that is Tia Amundsen from The Winter Road by ADRIAN SELBY. Still love this character, still think about her more often than I probably should. She lives in my head, and she's a woman who is incredibly strong, but as I mentioned before, she has a lot of vulnerability, and she owns that vulnerability. In fantasy, sci-fi, generally in a lot of different genres, we see female characters having to portray a level of strength that, in my opinion, seems very unrealistic and seems very forced. We do not get that with Tia Amundsen. She's just got so many layers, so much rawness to her power, to her strength, that is just so satisfying to read. And I just loved every single second of it. And I cannot wait to read The Winter Road because of that. For the quote, love is speaking the truth because it hurts, and it is hiding it to avoid hurt. And choosing right never comes easy or often. And that quote in itself just gives you a little flavour of what she's like and what she stands for. All right, we've got our top 3. This is exciting. I'm excited. I mean, 2 of these people are probably not going to be to be fair, I don't think any of these are going to be a surprise. So let's go ahead into our final 3. In 3rd place, we have Basso from The Folding Knife by KJ Parker. Basso is so good. Still lives in this head every day. Still think about this guy every day. Like, no joke. All 3 of these characters, to be honest with you, I think about them way too often, and for different reasons. But Basso in particular, you know, he reminds me of me. I mean, I don't think I'm as morally bankrupt as he is. I like to think I'm not. But his kind of like trajectory from being this kind of like young, immature man to becoming the ruler of, I've forgotten the name of the city now, but becoming the ruler of the place where he is, and then seeing the way that he adapts to that, and then seeing how he has relationships with other people. I mean, there's certain things that I can definitely identify with. I mean, there's certain things that I definitely don't, just to be clear, but I don't know, just how he is as a person, how he handles things, how he is as a leader, and how he develops and how he kind of accepts his own mistakes towards the end of the book. Like, I love everything about Basso's arc. Like, it's just so fantastic and satisfying to read. And I just think that if you like really, really intelligent characters, then Basso has to be up there with Glockter as one of the most intelligent characters. Again, maybe even the most intelligent, I don't know. Like, it would be a very interesting fight off between Basso and Glockter, I think, because I think they're both insanely smart. If you had those 2 as your nemesis, you would be screwed. Like, you would be screwed. I also think he's very human. Like, the mistake that leads to his inevitable downfall is something that could have been very easily avoided. So he's a human being, and human beings make mistakes. And I think that just makes his character even more compelling, because he's not this unreachable individual. He's just like everybody else. Very, very smart, but he makes mistakes just like everybody else, which is what makes him so interesting. All right, so my quote is this. That's the thing, she said. You add on getting rid of starvation and poverty like it's a fringe benefit, like the slice of lemon you get with a piece of whitebait. He laughed. That's why I succeed, he said, where the men with beautiful souls always fail. If you walk through the market asking the stallholders to give you a slice of lemon for free, they'd laugh in your face. Pay for the whitebait and you get a good meal of whitebait for your money, plus the free lemon. So smart, like so smart. Like, he's not wrong. Let's be honest, he's not wrong. All right, in 2nd place, this is a new entry. I wonder if anyone's guessed it. And that is Naya from the Prince of Nothing trilogy by R. Scott Baker. I love Naya. Naya is absolutely incredible, and honestly, he probably should be first on this list, but because of the emotional attachment that I have to the first character on this list, which you probably would have guessed by now if you've been watching my channel for a while, he would probably top it. But Naya is just, oh man, he's just so complex. In the first book, we get this picture of this very like black and white character. You know, he's just evil and he's very ruthless and like doesn't really think beyond himself and his people. But then as the books progress, we actually realize that that is not the case, and he's incredibly complex. Honestly, he just wants to be loved like everybody else, and he just wants to be appreciated and respected like everybody else. Again, similar to Basso, he's just a normal human being who has emotions, and it's just so fascinating to read. His arc was the one that I was most committed to, that I was most invested in. At the end of the first book, I thought he was an interesting character, but the second book, The Warrior Prophet, really took his character to a whole nother level. And I will never forget Naya because of that. There's certain things, certain revelations that we get in the third book that really distinguish him as a character that I think a lot of people will just find really compelling. Even if you can't necessarily identify with him and his personal struggle, I think you'll just find him compelling as an individual because of what he goes through and some of the stuff that he says. And my favorite quote is actually a quote that I've quoted it before. I think I quoted it in my 1000-fold thought review. I could be wrong. And I just love it because it's a quote that I actually think about more often than I also probably should. Here we go. You know nothing of war. War is dark, black as pitch. It is not a god. It does not laugh or weep. It rewards neither skill or daring. It is not a trial of souls, not the measure of wills. Even less is it a tool, a means to some womanish end. It is merely the place where the iron bones of the earth meet the hollow bones of men and break them. Like, how can you write that? Like, that is some insane writing. Oh man, Naya. So good. So good. All right, we're on to the final one. Now, if you've been watching my channel for a while, I don't know how you haven't got this by now. I'd be very surprised if you haven't, because I love this character, and this character will live rent-free in my head until the end of time. I don't know what it's going to take to knock this character off this list, or like even lower him down, even by like a place or two, because he has my heart, guys. This character has my heart, and that is none other than Logan Ninefingers in the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. He's retained the #1 spot from last year. And let's be honest, he will probably retain that spot until the end of time, like I said. Logan, to me, is still a character that I feel very conflicted about. You know, there's this kind of one side of him, the Bloody Nine, where, you know, we see this kind of very violent, aggressive, dark side of him. We don't really know why that exists, but it does exist. And I think in order to like Logan, you have to accept both parts of him. But then this other side, we see this very respected, this very kind individual who really cares about the people around him, and he's actually got a lot of soul and he's got a lot of heart. You might not get that. I don't know, there's just so many things I love about Logan. Like, I think he's just the ultimate anti-hero in so many ways, but I genuinely believe at his core he's a good person, and he's just in a really shit situation. All right, so I'm going to read one quote from him. It's a very long quote, but it's such a fantastic quote. It's from the Blade itself, and it really does paint a picture of him. And it's Logan himself speaking, so it's even in the man's own words. All right, let's go. I fought in 3 campaigns, he began, in 7 pitched battles, in countless raids and skirmishes and desperate defenses and bloody actions of every kind. I fought in the driving snow, the blasting wind, the middle of the night. I've been fighting all my life, one enemy or another, one friend or another. I've known little else. I've seen men killed for a word, for a look, for nothing at all. A woman tried to stab me once for killing her husband, and I threw her down a well. And that's far from the worst of it. Life used to be cheap as dirt to me. Cheaper. I fought 10 single combats and I won them all, but I fought on the wrong side and for all the wrong reasons. I've been ruthless and brutal and a coward. I've stabbed men in the back, burned them, drowned them, crushed them with rocks, killed them asleep, unarmed, or running away. I've run away myself more than once. I've pissed myself with fear. I've begged for my life. I've been wounded, often and badly, and screamed and cried like a baby whose mother took her tit away. I've no doubt the world would be a better place if I'd been killed years ago, but I haven't been, and I don't know why. He looked down at his hands, pink and clean on the stone. There are few men with more blood on their hands than me. None that I know of. The bloody nine, they call me, my enemies. And there's a lot of them. Always more enemies and fewer friends. Blood gets you nothing but more blood. It follows me now, always, like my shadow. And like my shadow, I can never be free of it. I should never be free of it. I've earned it. I've deserved it. I've sought it out. Such is my punishment. Oh, if that isn't tragic, I don't know what is. Like, feel the heart in that. Like, you can tell that he regrets it. You can tell that he doesn't fully agree with everything that he's had to do. And that's why I love Logan, because I feel like, yeah, maybe we're not all murderers like he is. I mean, at least I hope not. But I think we can all empathize with being in that position where sometimes, you know, maybe you've been put in a position where you've had to do something that you didn't want to. And hopefully you did the right thing. And I think in certain cases, Logan definitely does do the right thing, but my gosh, is he a tragic character? And I honestly don't know what it would take to knock him off the #1 list. So there we have it. That's my top 21 characters list with a few honorable mentions. So many fascinating characters that I've read over the years, and especially this year. I mean, there were quite a few new entries, which is always a good sign. I will definitely do this again next year, so I'm excited to do that. So let me know if you agree with any of these. Let me know what your top 10, top 20 characters list looks like at the moment, because I'm always really curious and it always helps me find new books that I can pick up. But I had a lot of fun like prepping this and looking for the quotes, and so I'm really excited to discuss it with you guys. As always, I'll see you in the next video, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I'll speak to you very soon. Ciao.